Welcome to Toil, Episode 8. I am here with Tom Moore, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, where he focuses on democracy and government reform. And before that, he spent 8 years with the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, as counsel and then chief of staff to Commissioner Ellen Weintraub. Now he is behind one of the boldest ideas right now that a lot of folks in this space are talking about to get corporate money out of politics. And it's a plan called the Corporate Power Reset, which I find a little funny. The acronym is CPR, which sort of feels like that's where our democracy is right now.
Exactly.
Tom, thank you so much for joining today.
That's my pleasure.
I'd like to jump in right away to this new idea that you've designed that several states are already trying out, namely Montana and Hawaii are leading the way. This idea to basically get around Citizens United. A lot of folks talk about a constitutional amendment. I've talked about that as well. But this could be a way to just make it irrelevant. And to give listeners a sense of just how bad the situation is right now with corporate spending in our elections, since Citizens United in 2010, outside spending, and you have this in your report, has increased by 28 times from 144 million in 2008 to over 4.2 billion in 2024. So that's where we are. And I discussed in one of my past episodes how this kind of influence is so corrupting. Our representatives answer to their donors and not us. Even if a vast majority of voters want something, our representatives either do nothing or they do the opposite of what we want. So, and you and I have talked about this before, every issue we care about, basically, we will not be able to succeed or make progress on until we get money out of politics.
That's right.
So, to your idea, can you walk us through what is the corporate power reset and how does it basically make Citizens United irrelevant?
Sure. So Citizens United, the case, took a federal law that said corporations cannot spend in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the court said, like, look, based on this older case, Buckley v. Vallejo, the only way you can regulate spending in politics is if there's a corruption interest or the appearance of corruption. And if you've got somebody who's spending independently of a candidate, you're not talking to them, you're not planning with them, you're not coordinating with them, then you can't possibly be corrupting them because you're doing it independently.
Which is just wild, right?
It is just wild. And we have seen in the last 16 years, false.
Exactly.
As a matter of law, though, it cannot corrupt them. And as a matter of law, it can't even create the appearance of corruption, which is wild.
Yes.
Obviously false, but it is the law. It is something that the Supreme Court has decided and held on to pretty well, and we're not going to get around that. So what they did is they said, hey, this law, this regulation that bans that is unconstitutional. You can't enforce that anymore. That's gone. And that led to just unlimited corporate spending. And a follow-up case a couple months later called Speech Now, which we'll talk about, basically said like, oh, well, if you've got money coming out of this PAC that is unlimited because they're doing it independently, then money coming into the PAC must also be unlimited because that can't be corrupting either. That's obviously false.
Right.
But that's what happened. That's what those two cases did to our system and led to the numbers that you're seeing. And what the corporate power reset does is get around that. And it says, like, look, regulation side is dead. If you try to regulate any of this spending, you're just walking into a buzzsaw with Citizens United, and it'll die 5 seconds into court. And what this says is like, okay, just forget that. Let's take one step back before that. And where do corporations, like, what are corporations and where do they come from and who creates them, who defines them? And it turns out they're all creatures of state law. And there are sections of every state's law that define corporations and give them their powers. And for the last 150 years, most states have had something in their laws that say, hey, we can change up your powers at any time or get rid of you altogether, and you can't complain about it. And it affects new corporations, it affects existing corporations, and it affects out-of-state corporations just as much as it affects in-state corporations, because everyone in the state is going to have the same corporate powers. And that's what this approach does. And it says, like, look, for the last 100 years, ever since the early 1900s, every state gave away every power to every corporation all the time to do anything. And that was for competitive reasons, not legal reasons. There's never been a Supreme Court case that said a state has to give any particular power to any corporation. So we're just going to shorten up that list of powers a little bit. We're going to say, like, instead of giving you every power to do everything that a human can do, we're going to give you every power to do anything that a human can do, except spend in politics. And for 200 years, the corporate law precedents on that have said that the states have plenary power to do this, unlimited authority to do this. All you do if you're a court, when a state makes a move like that, is ask, hey, is there something in the law that says you can do this? If the answer is yes, we're done. And 50 states have this in their laws. But no one has tried it. Basically, all the states gave all the powers away 100 years ago. All the states matched that. New Jersey went first. Everybody matched it. And for the last 100 years, that's where it's stood. And we don't really think of corporations as being state-based. And if a Delaware corporation wants to operate in Montana, Montana has to give it the power to operate as a corporation in Montana. That's what's happening all the time, but we don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
And what this approach does is kind of crack that open and say, like, actually, we can. And, all a state has to do is change its statutes, either through a regular bill or a citizen initiative, or change its constitution if you really want to set it in stone, and just shorten up that list. And when you do that, for all the entities, artificial persons, anybody that's not a real human person, it basically it just cuts them out altogether. And because that group includes all of these C4 corporations and LLCs and all these other groups and unions and chambers of commerce and so forth, they're all artificial persons of different flavors. It gets all the dark money out of the system as well.
Yes.
So it doesn't take care of everything, but it takes care of a lot.
Yes.
And when a state passes this, afterwards, every dollar in their politics will be from a human being. It'll be disclosed and it'll be voluntary.
Yes.
And that's a much better system than we have now.
I love it. And a follow up on that last point, I didn't fully appreciate this when I first learned about this, the getting the dark money out. Because the C4, the C6 trade associations, the LLCs, that's how these massive either individual billionaires or corporations hide who they're giving to. And so, Jeff Bezos can still give $100 million to a super PAC, for example, but he can't hide it through an LLC.
Right.
Because that's a corporation.
Right. We think of dark money and super PACs and all that, and it's actually not just super PACs by themselves. There's something in the middle. It's this dark money group where these are different charities. Like you've got C3, C4, C5, C6s. C3s are charities like the Red Cross, hospitals, universities, churches. They're actually not allowed to spend in politics because of their tax designation. These C4s, they're called social welfare organizations, and they can spend in politics. They can do lobbying. They can do a lot of education and so forth. And they do a lot of really good work. And a lot of them don't do any political spending at all, but a lot of them do. And that's where all this dark money comes from. So a person of great means can give to a C4 group, and the C4 group gives to the super PAC. Yep. The super PAC is it's a little odd, but it's not a regular committee, but it is a political committee regulated by law in certain ways, and it has to report all of its donors. But if the only donor it has is this dark money group, then that's the only name it reports. And this group doesn't have to report its donors at all. And
can you say a little bit more on, because I think this is confusing the first time someone hears it. If I'm a corporation incorporated in Delaware, but I operate in Montana, do I also have to be incorporated in Montana for any operations, and therefore I would fall under this?
Not exactly. You're chartered in one state. And so, and most big corporations are chartered in Delaware. And so if you're a Delaware corporation, you get a charter from Delaware, that gives you an amazing list of powers and things that you can do in Delaware.
Right.
And that's it. Anything that you want to do as a corporation anywhere else is because that other state says, like, yeah, come on in. We'll register you. We'll tax you. We'll regulate you. We'll do these things. And underneath all of that, and no one's really talked about this for 100 years, but essentially they empower you to operate as a corporation. And that's, so you're not getting a new charter when you cross the state border, but the state is giving you power because it's recognizing what was in your charter elsewhere and saying, like, okay, now you can come in, you can have powers, but you only get the same powers that our own corporations get.
Right. And under your plan, the power to spend in elections would not be in that list.
That's right.
Right. Okay. I want to get a little weedsy on just a couple questions about what could happen when this most likely goes to the courts. And I think it's been challenged already in Hawaii? Okay.
So it was signed into law by the governor of Hawaii in May. And in June, they got a federal lawsuit against it.
Which you were anticipating.
Yes, absolutely. And hoping for, really. Yeah. We want to get this to the Supreme Court and the
favorable ruling.
Yes. Well, we'll see. Yeah.
We hope. Okay. So When your idea came out last year, it got everyone talking. Lots of legal scholars, lots of constitutional lawyers, folks are discussing all the things that could come up as it goes through the courts. And one question I've seen is this acknowledgement that, shockingly, neither Citizens United the ruling nor the dissents mention this state law feature that you've discovered and are pushing. Does that help a case through the courts? Does it hurt it? Does it not really matter? What are your thoughts on how no one thought about this?
Yeah. It's kind of striking. The Citizens United and a couple of cases before it really didn't talk about corporate powers at all. They assumed that corporations had the powers, and they said, okay, now that you've got the power, we'll talk about whether your right can be infringed or not. And in Citizens United, they said, okay, this empowered corporation, it's got this right, and the regulation that's affecting this is not okay. It's unconstitutional. It's got to go. So that's by not dealing with the powers at all, it just kind of shows just how buried that's been. Nobody's really thought about corporate powers for the last century or so, because we kind of set it, we gave them everything, and then just kind of let it ride from there.
Okay, great. Okay, I want to pivot a little bit from the corporate power reset to Speech Now and efforts to deal with that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that earlier. This is another court decision that did not actually go to the Supreme Court yet. Right. And I don't think it gets enough attention. Everyone, understandably so, seems to know about Citizens United, but not enough folks know about this decision that, like you said, was just a few months after Citizens United in 2010, that basically created the super PAC that we have today. And there is another scholar, Lawrence Lessig, who I believe you know and wrote an amicus brief about this with him. They're trying an idea in Maine to limit the contributions that someone could give to a super PAC. Can you talk about that effort there and what's happening and how likely that is to help us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the Speech Now versus FEC was a DC Circuit case. So it was held. It was the case was heard here, and they ruled that that unlimited contributions, if you're making independent expenditures, can't be limited because that can't be corrupting it.
Can you talk about independent expenditures? What that means?
That is instead of giving directly to a campaign, that is this idea that it's like, oh, we're just going to run ads about the candidate, or we're going to run ads about the party or the issue, but we're not going to coordinate with these guys at all.
Right.
So it can't, under Citizens United and a couple other cases, these things cannot be corrupting. So, and a super PAC, it's kind of a slang term. It's and at the Federal Election Commission for the longest time, they were known as IEOPCs, or Independent Expenditure Only Political Committees. And
very catchy.
Very catchy. But and it was kind of funny after a while, but it's actually very descriptive, where it's like these are committees that don't make any regular contributions to candidates at all, like a regular PAC does. These are IEOPCs. We will only make independent expenditures. And because of that, unlimited money in, unlimited money out.
Yep, okay.
Stephen Colbert very famously created a super PAC. And the way that you would get one for the longest time is you had a PAC application, and then you had a letter that you put on top of it that said, we will only be making independent expenditures, and so we will be accepting unlimited money. And Colbert sat down with his lawyer on the set and basically said, okay, so he's got all the papers that he pulled out, and he goes like, all right, so here's the paperwork. It's like PAC, super PAC, super PAC, and that is it. That is the that is the difference between a regular political action committee and a super PAC.
Yep. Okay. Last follow-up before we go to a break. Back to what Lawrence Lessig is trying to do in Maine,
right.
Dinner Table Action, I think it's called. What is that case about?
That's the lawsuit. A couple years ago, he worked with folks there to get a ballot initiative on the ballot that said, hey, we're just going to regulate super PACs like regular PACs. The most you can give to a super PAC is $5,000, just like a regular PAC. And after the D.C. Circuit decided Speech Now, 7 other circuits, there are like 13 or so, agreed with that. But the First Circuit, which includes Maine, never got that case. And so if you're in some of these cases, in some of these circuits that have agreed with Speech Now, you'll lose every time because that's the circuit precedent. But it's the question that's never been asked in the First Circuit, so it's kind of a clean slate there.
Okay.
So got this thing on the ballot. Maine voters went for it. It actually got more votes than anything that that had ever been on the ballot in Maine's history,
Wow.
which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
Immediately struck down by a district court judge citing speech now, and then got appealed to the First Circuit, where it is right now. And just last week, they had oral arguments there. It seems like they got a really good panel. The judges were exceptionally well prepared,
Right.
asked terrific questions, and it seemed like, it's hard to tell exactly from an oral argument, but it seemed like it went well for Lessig and the state of Maine that was defending this.
Great.
So we'll know in a couple months what happens with that. If the state of Maine wins and defends its law, then it'll probably go to the Supreme Court because you'll have a circuit split where 7 circuits say one thing and one circuit says something else.
Okay. Okay. Now, if this were to succeed and survive a court challenge, and the corporate reset survives its court challenge, what would that mean for the landscape of money in politics? How much does that solve?
It would quite a bit, not everything, but quite a bit. The corporate power reset gets all of the corporate and dark money out, and so it's basically all this corporate behavior kind of slides it out of the system altogether. And Lessig's reform gets all the big money out. So basically, the problem with the super PAC is that one person can write a $250 million check to the super PAC, and the super PAC can just write $250 million out. And under the corporate power reset, they'll still be able to do that. They won't be able to hide their name.
Right.
But if you're someone like Elon Musk, you don't care. And you just, your name gets attached to this stuff, you don't care.
Yeah.
Lessig would stop that. And basically, if you've got a super PAC that can raise money in $5,000 increments, enough to spend $250 million out, it's like, that's still a lot of money, but you're not worried about one person exerting $250 million worth of influence in one direction.
Right.
So that'd be a very major reform. But the two of them together actually work really well together.
Yes.
Because that's the one major thing that the corporate power reset doesn't handle is individuals giving a gigantic amount of money.
Right. Right.
But yeah, he would. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
It's like he's relying on again, kind of like regulations, like the kind that were struck down by Speech Now and Citizens United and all those other cases. And so he's gone the regulatory route, which has been tougher.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see pretty soon.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to dig a little bit more into what exactly is a PAC and the difference between a traditional PAC and a super PAC. Welcome back. I am speaking with Tom Moore, a scholar with the Center for American Progress and an expert in getting money out of politics. Tom, I'd like to do a little bit more educational 101 on PACs and super PACs. You talked about it a bit. I want to dig into specifically a corporate PAC.
Right.
Because we hear this all the time. A lot of candidates, a lot of Democrats say, I don't take a penny of corporate PAC money. Can you talk about what that actually means and what it doesn't mean?
Yeah. So what a corporate PAC is, say you're General Motors, you're not allowed to spend directly in politics. You can't just write a check to a candidate's campaign. But you can set up a PAC, a political action committee, or the technical term is a separate segregated fund. And that actually, again, sounds kind of wonky, but it does actually describe it pretty well, where this is an organization and account that sits outside General Motors. And General Motors can harass its employees to give to the PAC, like my brother who works there. And they do, but it's limited to $5,000 a piece.
And shareholders can give too, right?
Yeah, they don't tend to. It's funny. They tend not to solicit their shareholders. There are certain classes of people they can solicit, and they're fairly large classes of people, but not unlimited. They can't just go to their line employees, and it's like executives and people a certain level up.
Okay.
So that PAC, they can spend money. They can spend money directly in elections and so forth. But it is all from individual American citizens. It's all it's capped, and it's all reported. Their names are reported, and so forth. I think corporate PACs have gotten a lot of attention recently because it is something that we can do something about. Right. You can ask a candidate not to take corporate PAC money, and they can say, "Yes, I will take no corporate PAC money," and that's maybe it's a good thing, bad thing, but it's something you can ask a candidate to do.
Right.
Where with super PACs and dark money and all stuff, there's nothing a candidate can do. They can't order a super PAC to stop spending money because they're spending independently.
Yep.
And it would be illegal for them to do that.
Right.
So it's and so I think in some ways corporate PACs have become kind of the boogeyman of a lot of campaign finance talk, because it is something that anybody can do anything about,
Right.
and there's so little that anybody can do
Right.
anything about until
Right.
now.
Right.
And so it's but it's they're you talk about corporate PACs, but it's also like if it's IBM or General Motors, you think like, okay, corporate PAC. But if you've got a union that raises money, voluntary money from its members, that's also a corporate PAC. And if you're the Sierra Club and you have a PAC that raises money and spends in elections for environmental issues,
Right.
that is also a corporate PAC, because they're a 501c4 or C3 corporate nonprofit corporation. So the idea that like corp PACs are bad,
Not always.
not always, and it's kind of, and there are coercion problems and that kind of thing there,
Right.
but in some ways, oddly, when you're approaching it the way we are, which is kind of disempower corporations altogether. In some ways, corporate PACs are the good guys in this, where it's kind of like, okay, you can't spend money out of your treasury anymore, but you can ask your members to give
Right.
to the PAC, and that's how they can express themselves and express the values of General Motors or the Sierra Club or whatever
Right.
in politics.
Right.
So they're kind of an escape valve.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, let's take all of this and think of it through the lens of, if I am an incredibly wealthy individual who then probably has a company. So let's say I'm Jeff Bezos and I've got Amazon. What are all the ways that I can spend my personal money and Amazon's money to influence elections currently?
So a lot of different ways. One, if you're Jeff Bezos and you're running for office yourself, you can spend an unlimited amount of money. Mike Bloomberg did this when he was
Right.
running for mayor in New York. He basically didn't raise a lot of money. He spent a gigantic amount of money, and he just wrote a big check to himself. And in some ways, it's kind of like, it looks like you're buying an office, but from the way the Supreme Court's been looking at it, it's like, well, you can't corrupt yourself, so you can't regulate that.
Right.
And that's been the law since the 1970s. But if you're Jeff Bezos, you can also give a lot of money. You can give, $3,500 per election to a candidate committee. You can give, and for the primary and then for the general. And then your spouse could also do that. You can give to a party. You can actually, based on the NRSC decision that the Supreme Court decided about a month ago, you can give to 50 different state parties, and you can give to all kinds of headquarters funds and this kind of thing. And they are now allowed to transfer that money from anywhere, any state party to any candidate. And so you can actually, I think it ended up being more than $500,000 in,
If you add that all
called
up.
hard dollars, that can go to a candidate if you wanted that. You can give to the Amazon PAC if you wanted. And then, of course, you can give a gigantic amount of money to a dark money group that will hide the funds that get spent. They can actually spend it directly or give it to a super PAC. Or you can give a gigantic amount of money to a super PAC that will disclose your name. And actually, all of these routes do disclose your name except giving to the dark money group.
Okay, right.
And you can do that in an unlimited amount.
Yep. Okay. And on the PAC, so I could create an Amazon PAC that I could only give 5,000 to, maybe
Right.
5,000 in the primary and 5,000 in the general.
No, because the PAC is your contribution limit to the PAC is not per election, because the PAC can spend on anything. So it's
but I have a 5,000 cap
per cycle.
per cycle. Okay. But I could also either create myself, or if my friends create, the Americans for No More Taxes PAC, I
Right.
can also give to that. So I could give to a
Absolutely.
bunch of different traditional PACs up
Yeah.
to the 5,000.
Yeah. So a political committee in the law is any group of people who get together and spend more than like $5,000 or on politics. And if it's the main thing that you do,
Yep.
you're not just a group of people anymore. You're a political committee,
Yeah.
and you are required to register with the state or the federal government. You're required to report what goes in and goes out, and that's the overlay on groups of people that want to get together and spend in politics. The law has requirements on the groups of people. What one of the thoughts with the corporate power reset is, it's like, well, there's no requirement for the state to lay the corporate form on top of any of that. It's like, if you're spending in politics, okay, political committee, but if we're a bunch of people who want to spend in politics, there's no God-given right to be a 501c4 nonprofit corporation.
Right. Okay. Lastly, before another break, we're only talking about spending in elections. And I've talked about this in past episodes and on social media, and I get a lot of comments around, what about lobbying? This doesn't address lobbying. But you brought up an interesting idea I heard recently around, well, yes, this doesn't directly address lobbying, but when you take away this tool, that matters. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. A corporate lobbyist is not just the most charming person in the world. He or she has a bank account behind them, whether it's part of their compensation that they can spread some money around that way, or they say like, hey, I work for this big corporation that can write an unlimited size check to a dark money funded challenger who's going to run you out of office in the next term.
Yep.
That's one of the things about dark money is it's not even like we've got the numbers are astonishing how much dark money is being spent, but it's the threat of spending dark money. It's the fact that you can spend dark money that is almost more pernicious because it just means like, because then you don't even have to spend the money, right?
Exactly.
You can say you can talk to an office holder and say like, I don't have to say a word, and you know
Yep.
that I can have $10 million spent against you tomorrow.
Exactly.
And it's just the threat of it is pretty bad.
Exactly.
So part of what the corporate power reset will do is remove that. And so basically, if you're an ordinary citizen who wants to go see a legislator and talk about an issue, or you're a corporate lobbyist who wants to go in and talk about an issue, you'll be on much more equal footing. And that'll be a good thing. You don't want to ban lobbying altogether. Lobbying is some group of people or an individual citizen going to their legislators to
Right.
complain about something, praise them, educate them,
Right.
and it is actually a very essential part
We
of
need
our
that
system.
access to our lawmakers.
Exactly. And then and they need it from us,
Right.
really, just
Right.
to know what's going on.
Right. But the rest of us don't have this, dark money millions that we can spend behind us.
That is correct.
Right. Okay. Let's take our last break. And when we come back, we'll close out with whether we still need a constitutional amendment. And if we do, what should it say? Welcome back to my conversation with Tom Moore with the Center for American Progress about getting money out of politics. All right, to close out today, I want to dig into whether we need a constitutional amendment to truly rid ourselves of this incredibly corrupting influence that big money and dark money and billionaire money has in our politics. Now, you shared earlier, we talked about your corporate power reset idea and Lawrence Lessig's efforts in Maine to cap contributions to super PACs. And you've talked about how if both of those succeed, we're in a much better place.
Right.
But I want us to think about and be ready for maybe one of those doesn't, or maybe both of those don't.
Sure.
And I think you would say in that case, we absolutely need a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, and even if both of them pass, it's not 100% of the issues that are going on. There will still be problems. If a state wants to do public financing, it's like it can only be voluntary, it can't be required. And so they're all or in this kind of general idea that Mike Bloomberg could spend $100 million on his campaign for mayor of New York. Lessig's reform does not handle that because you can still spend it on your own. A constitutional amendment would handle that.
Okay.
Problem is that you need a 2/3 vote in each house of Congress, and then it goes out to the states, and you've got to get 3/4 of the states. And that there are a lot of states and a lot of organizations that are working in the states to kind of get resolutions passed and this kind of thing.
Right.
But we haven't even gotten the first step done, which is to get it out of Congress.
Right.
And that is it. It may take years for that to happen. It may never happen. And even once that does happen, you might fight a holy war in your states to get it passed, and then nothing happens until 3/4 of the states pass it.
Right.
So one of the kind of cool things about the corporate power reset is that when Montana passes it, they clean up their elections top to bottom, like the minute it goes into effect. Hawaii, July 1st, 2027, their local, state, and federal politics will be clear of corporate and dark money. But there are. And if these reforms go down, if CPR gets overturned, or if Lessig's bid doesn't succeed, they may be galvanizing events that will tell the public it's like, hey, like we took our best shot at these things and we still can't do it. So the only way we'll be able to fix this with this court in a moment where corporations are spending all this money, the only way we can do it is amend the Constitution.
Right. Right. And I want to, you talked about we haven't even gotten it out of the House and the Senate yet, but there are a lot of proposals. And so I want to get your thoughts on, I've found about 5 main proposals that different Congress people have introduced, some of them several times because you have to reintroduce a bill every Congress. And I'm curious what you think about how bold the actual text of the amendment needs to be, because there's a wide range. There's Representative Jayapal, who is, I think, the boldest, which is, it says corporations are not people and money is not speech. And it forces Congress to regulate money in elections. And it requires disclosure, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where some proposals don't really do any of that. They just say Congress is allowed to regulate. And that just doesn't seem strong enough to me, because I don't trust Congress is going to do that. How bold do we need to be?
Actually, I'm not sure I'd put it on that scale, because and I kind of lean toward the second one, because if like the idea that corporations are not people, it's like, well, they're not human people, but they are actually legal persons. And so saying that they're not people is not really that helpful, because that's not the problem. The problem is, it goes back to this Buckley case that we talked about, that the only reason you can regulate any of this is if you're going after corruption or the appearance of corruption. And then even what counts as corruption or appearance of corruption, they've spent the last 50 years narrowing. And so that's really hard hurdle to get over if you're trying to stop any of this. And in fact, in that case, they said, look, if you want to level the playing fields, like leveling the playing field is a concept that is alien to our Constitution. It's like, oh yeah, okay. We kind of all have equal political rights. That seems like a level playing field there. So if there's, I think probably the simpler, the better. If an amendment that just says Congress may regulate that, it's not a command to, because you don't want to say exactly what it should be, like $5,000 or this. You don't want to be too prescriptive about it. But basically, what it does is say, look, Congress can do it. They don't have to jump through all these hoops. They are free to regulate money in politics. They are free to pass laws about it. It is not a matter of, they don't have to prove that it serves a corruption interest or any of those things. They may do it. And so there are different ways to do it. And honestly, I don't think we need to parse the wording too much, because none of them are going to happen anytime soon. But when you're thinking about it, it's like it's actually, Citizens United has kind of captured the public's imagination as the case that has ruined everything, and it's been that. But it really is this Buckley decision from 1976 that really, it was like that's the trunk of the tree, and Citizens United is just the fruit.
Because Buckley basically said money is speech. Right?
Not quite, but it just said a lot of limits on expenditures can't be. It tossed off a lot of limits on expenditures, and the underlying idea is money is speech. They didn't quite say it that way, but basically it just said it's the corruption rationale is that's the only reason you can do it. And there are lots of other reasons that we might want to regulate money in politics. And it just cut the legs out from all of them.
Okay. So to close out, what should people do? What should they be watching? Should everyone just closely watch what Montana and Hawaii are doing and what happens in Maine? And then, if those don't go well, get ready to pass an amendment. What should people do?
Right now, there's the group that's running the ballot initiative in Montana is the Transparent Election Initiative, transparentelection.org or montanaplan.com. And they are laser focused on getting this thing passed in Montana. They're going to vote November 3rd in Montana. And then after that, they want to take their show on the road. And any state that wants to pick it up as a ballot initiative, any state that wants to, pick it up as to go through the legislature, they are ready to support any state that wants to do that. They're providing lots of on-the-ground support. We here at the Center for American Progress can provide policy and legal support, drafting support, that kind of thing. The montanaplan.com has a tremendous number of resources, and they can tell you how to get things going in your state.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. You heard it. I'll drop all the links that Tom shared in the show notes, so you can follow along and support Montana and Hawaii and Maine. Thank you so much, Tom.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you.